Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Leo and what I have here today is the Seiko Saab 017, the green Alpinist. The movement inside is the Seiko 6R15. This should be a fairly straightforward service as this is a modern watch only a few years old. We'll get to see whether we have any plastic in this watch. If you ever wondered how the compass bezel actually works, we'll get to see all that. I also do much older watches. If you look at my previous video, a Seiko from March 1970, you will see how I add 2 more custom made jewels to remedy the worn out main plate and make it run beautifully. Let's have a look at how it behaves before we start on it. It's not measuring right now, it's in a stabilizing position. I set it to stabilize for 10 seconds for every position. If you're not familiar with the E-timer, also known as the escapement analyzer in the UK, the rate is here. This is the amplitude, that's the beat error. DD is for dial down. The train speed is here, that's the lift angle. And I set it to measure each position for 30 seconds. Here is the countdown for each position. Instead of the horizontal line you're probably used to, you get a vertical line on the tape here. When it's leaning to the left, it's losing time. Leaning to the right would be gaining time. You also get to hear the sound of the escapement. It's really good. It's the actual sound of the escapement. It's not like the fake ticking you get with the popular time grapher. I'll let you listen to it for a short moment, but the recording is nowhere near as good when you listen to it. So that was the sound. The recording doesn't do it justice. It's a nice crisp sound when you listen to it. And you also get the graphical representation of the sound here. I'll speed it up to the end and we'll have a look at the results. We get a nice summary here. Here we have the positions, dial down, dial up, pendant right and so on. The rate for each position, amplitude, beat error, and this is the duration of the timing. This tells us the difference between the slowest and the fastest rate of all positions. This is the difference between the dial down and dial up positions. Here we have the greatest difference between the pendant positions and also the amplitude fall off value between the greatest and lowest amplitude. It's losing a lot of time and the amplitude is very low. It does need a service. You can also run a long-term test for many hours. I'm speeding this one greatly so we can see how it looks after an hour, otherwise it will be like watching paint dry. Basically, you start it and leave it running for as long as you want. 20 minutes, an hour, 24 hours, more if you want. Entirely up to you, depending on what you want. I left this one running for just over an hour. You can see the rate here in red, that was slowly dropping over time. Deviation is in blue. The total deviation is the total number of seconds gained or lost from the beginning. Here's our line for the beat error over the time of measuring. And lastly, here we have a line for the amplitude. When you look at the rate, it just shows you how it differs over time. Of course, you'd never see this if you put it on the time grapher and measure it for a few seconds. And when you eventually stop it, the file is saved and you can review it whenever you want to. You can also zoom into it as it gets quite compressed over many hours. I'll put the links for this software in the description. It didn't look too good, did it? Losing a lot of time. According to Seiko, the 6R15 should be between -15 and +25 seconds per day. That's not great because if it gains 1 minute in 3 days, you can't complain to Seiko because they will tell you it's within specification. We'll have a look at it and see what we can do with it. It will be interesting to see how much the 6R15 differs to the 4R35 or the NH35. The 4R35 is 1 grade below the 6R15 and the NH35 is basically the same as the 4R35 but without the Seiko branding. Many micro brands use the NH35 movement, Invicta, Marathon and many others. I remember watching some videos a few years ago and they said when they took the back of there was plastic. As you can see, there is no plastic. That's the rotor, by the way. That's the part that moves when you move your wrist and that winds the watch. It meshes with the first reduction wheel, which is this one here. Okay, let's get a move on and get it out of the case. There are a couple of case clamps here holding it in place. The first one is close to the stem and the second one is close to the balance just over here. I'll use Rotor to get down there. It's much easier than using tweezers. Let me pause this. Look at this. Look at that. We do have plastic here after all. They were right. I take it all back. The videos were right and I was wrong. Let's have a close look at it. Plastic teeth on the underside of the bezel, and when you turn the compass crown, the wheel rotates the bezel. So that's how it works if you ever wondered. This is the setting lever. I push the tweezers in that little dimple to lift the other side of the lever from the groove in the stem, and that will allow me to pull the stem out. I'll show it to you in more detail during assembly how it works. Now the stem is out, there is nothing holding the movement in place, so I can put the case cushion there, flip it round, and the movement is finally out. While I'm here, I might as well get the compass crown out. It will need fresh silicone grease to keep it watertight, possibly a new O-ring. You can see the O-ring there that keeps water away. Now the hands can come off. Well, they have to come off now. And I'll use a protector not to mark the dial. I always prefer hand levers to the Presto tool. I've never had the need to use the Presto tool, but if the dial has some depth to it, I suppose I might have to use it one day. Oh, look at that luscious green dial. It looks delicious. It looks edible, doesn't it? Well, you're not bloody having it. It's my dial. You can eat your own, not mine. Probably doesn't taste as good as it looks. I think I'll pass. You can try it and tell me what it was like. That's the dial foot there, and this screw bites into it and keeps the dial in place. There are two. I'll show you just the one. Careful there. Don't mark the dial, Leo. Alright, I'm treating it like a baby, can't you see? Happy now? Now this ring, and we can take it all apart. What have we got here? See this? And this? That's plastic. You think I'm going to complain about it now, don't you? No, I'm not. I'll leave that to the other guys. I'll show you something that they won't show you. Look at this. You know what that is? That's a minute pinion from a Rolex 3035, and the green bit, that's plastic bushing. There you have it. Even the big boys do it. It can't be that bad then, can it? If you like Seikos and you're not sure about having plastic inside, don't worry about it. Don't let it put you off. It looks remarkably similar to the 4R36 or NH36 movement. See the post here? There would be a day corrector wheel on this post if it had a day disc like the 4R36 movement. The 6R15 doesn't have the day complication, but it still has the post for the day corrector from the 4R36 movement. So there you have it. This movement is not specifically made for the 6R15. Oh wow, look at the oil here. I think Seiko was meant to place it on the sides here, not on the top there. It shows you the machines are not perfect. I'm sure they can be, and hopefully they spotted this quickly. And as humans, except me, because I'm not a human, I'm a YouTube character, we're not perfect either. As humans go, anyone who'd miss the application of the oil like this would clean it with Rotor and apply the oil where it should be. The machine of course doesn't know. It dispenses the oil as per the program, and unless a human spots it, it will not be rectified. Seiko? Almost sounds like psycho, doesn't it? No, not me. Seiko, psycho. So let's start again. Seiko, I hope you've aligned it by now. You'd better have, because this watch is about 5 or 6 years old. And you, Bergeron, look at this. I'm using a Presto tool instead of a Canon pinion remover. Why? Because the Canon pinion remover I bought a few years ago only lifts Canon pinions that are 1mm in diameter or greater. And to add to the insult, by you I mean Bergeron, you improved it even more now. When I look at Cousin's site as of 2023, it now states it lifts Canon pinions from 1.2mm. What is going on? You're making it worse and worse. Look up the word improvement in your Swiss dictionary. I mean French dictionary. Sorry about that, it's just sometimes unbelievable. I'm talking and ranting and not explaining what is what. Don't worry, I'll make up for it during the assembly and explain all the parts, how they interact. You'll have a good understanding of how everything works even if you don't work on watches yourself. This is the top side. Some of you who have the see-through case back and you have the 6R15 or the 4R35-36 or one of the NH movements will now recognize some of the parts here. You of course have the oscillating weight in the way which is screwed down here, but you should recognize some of the parts if you look carefully. I'll get the pole lever out of the way. It's also known as the magic lever. And this is the ratchet wheel, and this wheel below is the mainspring barrel. I'm holding the click out of the way and slowly unwinding the mainspring. Yes, the mainspring is inside the barrel, and that's what powers your watch. The mainspring needs to be in its relaxed position before we remove the balance and the pallet fork, otherwise it will spin the train wheels like crazy, potentially causing damage. I want to see what the balance end shake is like, so I'll give it a little wiggle. It looks fine to me, not too much, not too little. When it comes down to the escapement, everything needs to be right. Everything needs to be right throughout the whole movement, but the escapement is crucial. If something is not quite right, just slightly, you will have a big problem when it comes down to the escapement. I used to remove the balance as soon as I got the opportunity to take it out, but after some time working on watches, you get used to handling the parts and you no longer feel like it's going to disintegrate when you look at it the wrong way. It's about confidence. If you don't feel confident working on the watch when the balance is in, you probably should take it out as soon as you can. Always think. Don't do anything silly. I also want to have a look at the pallet fork and shake before I take it out. I often can't see the end shakes that well. I have to take the SD card out of the camera afterwards and look at it on the large screen. This is where a microscope would be handy, but that would hinder the camera and the lights and everything else, so not that great for me for recording. But if I wasn't recording it, for some work, such as checking the end shakes, particularly something like the balance, the microscope is a very helpful tool. Now, can you imagine what would happen if I didn't let the power down? The train would be spinning like crazy and possibly causing damage to the pivots. Now's the time to check the end shakes. This is the escape wheel. I'm checking them now so I can adjust them before cleaning. This is the third wheel, by the way. Adjust it, clean it, and you have it nice and clean for assembly. That's the fourth wheel. It's under the bridge on the top side, so I'm giving it a pull here. It might be a bit tricky for you to see it, but I can see it. It's fine. Now let me zoom in on the center wheel. Note I'm using brass tweezers here. When I was testing the escape wheel and the third wheel, I was using my oiler. Gently, I suppose you could call it gently brushing the arbor. Now this is the first reduction wheel. It's practically hidden under the bridge. What I had to do to get to it and show you on the camera is to drink this special drink that shrinks you almost into a molecular level. Then I climbed on the main plate under the bridge. I'm just below here under the bridge. It's huge. It's 10 times bigger than me. But the drink also gives you strength, so let me test it. Yep. We've got handshake and hopefully I don't have hernia. Can't tell you what drink it is, it's top secret. It's not easy making these videos. You'd think I'm sitting at my desk talking into a microphone, but it couldn't be far from it. Honestly, I'm telling you the truth. Look at this, we've got a gold color arbor here, but no jewel for the arbor in the bridge. We have a bushing instead. Seiko, why don't you give us a jewel there? Don't tell me it's not doable. I put one in the bridge of a 7005 movement. Have a look at my previous video. It's the one from March 1970. No, I didn't publish the video in March 1970. YouTube didn't exist and neither did I. The watch was made in March 1970. I'll put an end screen at the end of the video so you can find it. You hard work, you know. I mean Seiko, not my viewers. My viewers are lovely. This is the first reduction wheel. That's the one when I had to shrink myself to show you the end shake. It looks messy, but it's fine after 5 or 6 years. The black grease is the Seiko S4 grease. This is what Seiko calls the sliding crown wheel spring. You'll see it from the top side and I'll show you how it works when I put it on during assembly. It looks kind of complicated, but it's not. It's just a spring and Seiko had to work out how to secure it to the bridge and the design of it ended up like this. But it's just a simple spring. This lower plate is on the underside of the bridge, or to be precise, Seiko calls it lower plate for barrel and train wheel bridge. How nice! It's secured with just the one screw and the wheel itself under the plate is not removable. This is going to be the Seiko S6 grease. Now I can take the click out. That's the fourth wheel. Now let me carefully remove the escape wheel. Come on you. Come on. That's the third wheel. And finally our barrel that has a gold coloured barrel arbor. That's certainly different to the NH36 arbor. And the last section of the train is the center wheel bridge and the center wheel itself. And the screw of course. Now let me remove the bridge. I'll do it carefully with my wooden tweezers. Maybe I won't. I'll try the brass ones. No, doesn't want to go. That's the way to do it. And we're left with the center wheel. Careful Leo or you're gonna break it. Now we're going to take the keyless mechanism apart. I'll disengage the spring tension here. This is where it was. You don't want any tension anywhere when you're removing parts. They would most likely become airborne, and trust me, being on your knees and in many cases also moving the furniture is no fun. Always think when you're taking something apart, look at the part you're removing, look at what it is connected to, and think what is going to follow when you remove it. If I didn't release the tension, it would have been quite difficult to remove the spring, and as soon as I'd lift it above this post here, it would most likely fly. Now we don't have any tension anywhere, we can comfortably lift all the parts that are here. This is the setting lever, and that's the balance stop lever, also known as the hack. It stops the balance wheel when you pull the crown out into the third position to set the time. Now the stem can be pulled out, and the clutch wheel, the winding pinion and the date corrector I can push down and let them drop on the bench mat. They'll be fine, they are sturdy wheels and the bench mat is designed for parts dropping on it. This is the fun part. These springs might not look it under the macro lens, but they are small. They are very small. You need good magnification for this job and lots of patience. I would advise wearing an apron just in case the spring decides to fly, so if it flies towards you, you will catch it in the apron. These are a little bit bigger, they are for the balance. I take the settings out prior to cleaning. You will cause no harm to the pivots in a watch cleaning machine, and the pivots will naturally get a much better clean if you take the settings out prior to cleaning. I used to keep them in place, but I don't anymore. You can have a look at it here, the pivots are out of the way. You're supposed to get a new barrel complete, not to take it apart. That's what the technical guide tells you to do. But that's only good to someone who has an account with Seiko. I've never really had any issues taking Seiko barrels apart, but you want to keep all the parts, especially the mainspring. The Swiss GR mainsprings are not the same. I showed the differences in detail in one of my previous videos. Be very careful when you're taking them apart so you can use the mainspring and all the parts from the original barrel. What I'm doing here, I'm coating the end stones in epilame. Epilame is a surface treatment, and in case of the end stones, it will keep the oil from spreading. You put more oil on a treated end stone and less on untreated end stone because the oil will spread. That's why you have to put less. This is the Rotor epilame that does not require heat drying. I use it because of that. It's less hassle. And as I like less hassle, I'm also using the automatic oiler here. Who doesn't like less hassle? I don't mind hard work, but if I can make something easier, I'll take that option anytime. Shaky, shaky, Leo. I know I need to cut down on the coffee when I make these videos, but the problem is I generally make them late night and I need the coffee. I hope you can see the oil here. It's Mobius 9010, very thin, definitely a good idea to use the epilame to stop it from spreading. That one went in nicely, I like it when it works out like this. And have you noticed I'm using brass probes? If you use some steel, something like pointed tweezers, the chances are you will scratch the setting. Not the jewel, that's harder than steel. The actual steel section the jewel is in. The disadvantage is that the brass will shed a little because it's soft. But it won't get to the underside of the end stone and you can clean it up with Rodico. Steel or brass, neither is perfect but both work. On this occasion I'll go for the brass. Now let me have a little battle with the bottom setting for the balance. It looks easy, it makes you wonder why I don't just slide it under, and it really is not that difficult. What makes it awkward is the size. I think you're looking at roughly 7mm across your screen. It's small. I wish I could see what you can see, but I don't. Well, we got it in anyway. It's one of these that you don't like doing, but when you've done it, when it's in, you get a great satisfaction from it. A quick tidy up. And now, as you can see, the balance is going nicely. No problem with the balance in the watch cleaning machine without the settings. We've got two more to do. This one is for the escape wheel. These are a little bit more difficult. They are smaller and they are not in a setting like the ones for the balance. That makes it a lot easier to knock the end stone from its place when you have the brass rods or whatever you are using for turning the spring on the top of the end stone. It's doable, as you can see. It's just a little bit more awkward than when they are in the settings. A quick tidy up. I forgot to press record when I did the first one, but naturally you have to put the end stone in its place first. And I've got something blue there. See that there on the right? I have no idea what it is and I didn't see it under the loop. It's that small. It's not jammed between the jewel and the end stone, so that's good, but we don't want it there. If it stayed there, it could eventually end up anywhere and cause issues. That's why you need to keep inspecting your work all the time. I spotted it eventually and the good old Rodico did its job. Always dab, don't wipe. It will spread oil if you tidy up oil. Now we've got the end stones in place, we can use the automatic oiler to make our life easy again. You could do it without the automatic oiler, but if you're going to do this often, you might as well invest in one of these. There you go, you can see the oil here. Right, the pesky jewels are out of the way and we can start on the keyless mechanism. These are the parts. I'll explain shortly why it's called a keyless. This is the stem. I'm using Mobius 9504 grease. I've got the Seiko greases, but I can't see much information about them anywhere, so I'm going for the Swiss synthetic greases instead. Now, keyless is called keyless because back in the day, you needed a key to be able to set the time and wind your pocket watch. Now you don't need a key to do that, but of course you need a mechanism inside the watch that will do the job the key used to do, and the mechanism has been called the keyless mechanism because you no longer need the key. So there you go. This is where the stem goes, so a little bit of grease there. Now I already have the date corrector on the stem, it goes in front of this little bridge. The other wheels, I have to put them on the stem now. That's the winding pinion, which is engaged in the first position when you unscrew the crown and is in action when you wind the watch. Now let me take the opportunity to put grease on the other three sides of the square section of the stem. And this is the clutch wheel. The clutch wheel is engaged in the third position. You set the time using this wheel. To recap this, in the first position when you unscrew the crown, this is the winding pinion for winding the watch. The second position, you engage the date corrector, which is for the quick set date to set the date. And in the third position is the clutch wheel that will connect with the motion work, which we will install later on, and you will be able to set the time. You'll get to see them all in action when the rest of the parts are installed. The keyless needs a decent grease. You are literally yanking the stem, so there is a lot of friction, and these parts are not moving when the watch is running. I flip to the other side and I'm placing some grease here for the stop lever that's engaged in the third position. It will stop the balance, hence you stop the watch and you can set the time. The movement of the lever is minimal. It's this stud here that will touch the balance when you engage it. This is the section of the stop lever that makes contact with the setting lever. There is a stud on the underside of the setting lever that goes into this groove. A little bit of Mobius 9501 grease here for the setting lever. You can see the end of the stop lever here. Now this is the setting lever. A stud on the underside goes into the groove in the stop lever, and this end here, that goes into a groove in the stem. Pushing or pulling the stem, you are moving the setting lever. A little bit of grease on the tip of the lever here. And here goes the yoke that also acts as a spring. One end goes into the clutch, just here where we've put some grease before, and the other end goes here where we've put some grease there earlier on. Let's put some 9504 on the yoke here. And a little bit of 9501 on the setting lever here. That's for the setting lever jumper. That's the jumper. It will keep all the components we've just installed in place. It also acts as a spring, and it's this end that will keep any of the three positions you are in place. Winding, quick set date or time setting. It ensures that, let's say we're in winding position, it will stay in winding position and nothing else will engage except the winding position. See how the setting lever stud fits in one of the three grooves in the jumper? It's a good idea not to tighten the screws fully. Put the spring where it should be and then tighten the screws. Now let's put some grease on the jumper in the three grooves. You'll be moving the stud along the three grooves when we are pushing or pulling the crown. It needs some grease to make the action smooth. You can tell by the color that it's the 9504 grease. Go on Leo, test it. We've got the setting lever in the stem, the yoke is in the clutch, and the setting lever stud is in the first groove in the jumper. That means we're in the winding position. So first position, and the winding pinion is rotating. Now let me pull to the second position. The date corrector is rotating as you'd expect. Obviously it rotates clockwise and anti-clockwise, but it's only anti-clockwise that sets the date. Before I pull the stem into the third position, let me explain. The tip of the setting lever under the jumper here will push the yoke forward, and that in turn will push the clutch wheel forward. When we have the motion work installed, the clutch wheel will engage with the minute wheel and it will be able to set the time. I'll push it in as you would do after you've set the time, and we are back in the first position, the winding position. And there's something else we've not tested, the stop lever, also known as the hack. I failed miserably and wasn't able to wind the mainspring in. I had to get a different barrel complete for the 6R15. They are impossible to get, but my friend John is a watchmaker and he sent me one that he had. If you have the set of 17 winders like me, you need the arbor number 4 and the drum number 7. That of course won't work. Maybe the other set for ETA mainspring would work. I don't know, I haven't got one. My advice is, don't take them apart unless you are sure you can put the mainspring back in. Time to start assembling the train. That's the center wheel and its bridge. Let's put a bit of the 9501 on the center wheel before we put it in the main plate. It makes it easier. And before I put the bridge on, a little bit of the Mobius HP 1300 on the pivot, where it's going to make contact with the center wheel bridge jewel. I like it when it gets to the train. It gets a little bit more exciting. I mean, I enjoy it all, but the train is fun. You get to test the wheels, everything is spinning. It's a joy. Unless it's not spinning, then it becomes a nightmare. And everything is good here. I'm happy. I'm going to put the Canon pinion on. You normally do it when the brain? You certainly haven't got one today, Leo. Alright, when the train is installed. And I thought, why not? The center wheel is in, the bridge is there, so let's do it now. Let's get it out of the way. Okay, let me put the Canon pinion on. A little push. Oh, I forgot to adjust the support pin. I told you didn't have a brain today. Let me show you the pin. There is a peephole in the holder so you can see the pin and you adjust it from the underside. Actually, let me get a little closer. Now you can see it. The pin is supporting the jewel so it won't flex when you push on it. And what did I do? I forgot to press record. No brain. Shut up. I forgot to press record, but it went well. The pin makes it solid. That's the whole purpose of the pin. Anyway, a few more bits to install before we can carry on with the train. This is all part of the winding mechanism. It's on the underside of the barrel and train bridge and I'm using the Mobius 9501. This pad is called the lower plate for barrel and train. It couldn't have been longer, could it, Seiko? Winding bridge? How's that? Seiko, consult Leo next time. The technical guy tells you to use the Seiko S6 grease, which I have, but I have never used it. Is it synthetic? Is it not? Admittedly, it's years ago I looked at it and I couldn't find much information about their greases, so I don't really use them. If you look at Mobius' website, they give you lots of info about their oils and greases, so I use them instead. This is the ratchet sliding wheel spring. As complicated as it looks, there is nothing to it. The complication was therefore Seiko how to attach it to the bridge. All it does, it keeps the sliding wheel pushed up when required. This is one of the few occasions when I use the Seiko grease. This is the S4 grease. By the color of it, it's got to be graphite. I use it on the first reduction wheel only. Now let's put the bridge over it and secure it with the clip, or reduction wheel holder if you want to be pedantic. Don't you be calling your viewers pedantic, Leo. Alright. This is epilame. The coating of the epilame will repel oil. We need to put oil here, and on the end I'm coating is where the second hand's going to go, and we don't want oil spread in there. See, this is where the oil needs to go. I'm using Mobius 9020. Look how close it is to the end of the pivot. Without the epilame, it would spread there. And finally, we can put the train together. This is all we need now. The first reduction wheel is in place, these jewels have been oiled, the lower plate is in place, and we've got a replacement barrel complete, as you know. Unless you were bad and skipped the section about the barrel. Leo, there are no bad viewers even if they skip parts. Will you stop nagging? You're the voice in my head, you're not supposed to be in my video. I am you. Oh, shut up. He's not stopped today, has he? He generally means well, but can get annoying sometimes. How do I supposed to comment on the video? That's the Mobius 9501 I've been applying on the barrel while I've been rudely interrupted. Let's put a sufficient amount here, there's a lot of torque here. And this is for the fourth wheel, I'm using Mobius 9020. Here goes the click. And that's the escape wheel. It's the last wheel of the train. It's the fifth wheel, but for whatever reason, it doesn't get a number. And that's the third wheel. For a change, this one doesn't get a name. It's like a prisoner, just a number. Poor old third wheel. It's not that old, it's only about 5 years old. And that's the fourth wheel, sometimes called the seconds wheel. A little bit of 9020 on the pivot. Now let's put the bridge on. I can feel it that it's going to fall in place right away. Not quite. Almost. I didn't miss the main plate. Let's move the click out of the way. It's looking reasonably good. Let's test it. They're all spinning. All pivots are in. Normally I have to fiddle around. Fiddle is a technical word. Normally I have to fiddle around with the escape wheel on the Seikos, but I got lucky this time. Look at that, spinning beautifully. I keep checking it throughout after every screw. I guess once one is down and all is well, you don't really have to worry about it, but I check it anyway. My brain releases a small amount of dopamine once the eyes register the escape wheel spinning. Some people check their phone to get a dose. Leo checks the escape wheel. Let's do a final check. Oh, that felt good. I'm telling you, it's better than a mobile. I know you call it a cell phone, but I'm in the UK. I'm not locked up in a cell. I'm mobile. That's the ratchet wheel. The click here will keep it arrested and will stop the mainspring from unwinding. A little bit of 90-10 for the escape wheel. That's the third wheel. I'm using 90-20. And the first reduction wheel, I'm using 9501. Let's have a look at it when everything's lubricated. Bit of slow motion for you to see the backlash. Nice? Did you like it? The pallet fork is one of my favourite parts in a watch movement. It's the odd one out, just look at the shape of it. And it's the connection between the train and the balance. Seiko tells you to hold the pallet fork pivots. Some of their technical guides for some movements don't, some do. I never lubricate them. None of the Swiss manufacturers do that. You would definitely get lower amplitude if you lubricate them. A little test. Let's put a little bit of power in the train so we can lubricate the pallet stones. I haven't found a good way of recording it, but I will explain. I'll be using the 941 oil. That oil is up to the speed of 21,600, which is the speed of this train. For higher speeds, you need the 9415 grease. I'll put a small amount of the oil on the exit pallet stone here, then I will advance the train, let's say 5 teeth, just like this. Now can you see the oil here I applied there? Now look what happens when I advance the escape wheel a little. See, it needs more oil. Once is not enough. I know I used to do that, but I'm progressing. So this escape wheel has 15 teeth. If you do it 3 times, every 5 teeth, it will be much better than just one drop. It needs to be properly lubricated. Okay, the big moment is coming soon. Is it going to run nicely or not? Am I going to feel good or bad? My moods are decided how the movements function when I put them together. Happiness in Leo's life is determined by watch movements and how well they run. Now that's the way to live a life. Others need a happy relationship, some need a great job, whatever. Leo doesn't need all that. All he needs is a movement that is running well and he's happy. The problem is, sometimes it's hard work to achieve the happiness. The amplitude looks very low at this moment, but don't forget I put only a very little power in the mainspring. Let me fully wind it and we'll have a look at it. It looks good, the amplitude, look at that. Okay, the moment of truth. It's been running for about an hour and I'm going to time it in 6 positions, 40 seconds each position, but the first 10 seconds will not count, it will be stabilizing for the first 10 seconds, so 30 seconds per position. If you skip the start, you should look at it because I explain how this software works, including the reading we get at the end after the timing. But just briefly, here's the rate, amplitude and beat error. The horizontal line you are used to is vertical here and is on this tape. Now let me speed it up because we'll be here for quite some time watching all 6 positions and we'll have a look at the reading at the end. Actually, let me slow it down for a moment and I'll let you listen to the sound. I'll alternate between the sound how it sounds now and what the sound was like before the service. Both sounds are dialed down position. That's pretty remarkable, a huge difference. Hearing the actual sound is a great advantage of this software. It lets you to identify issues. You don't even have to take the case back off and you might be able to tell what issues are waiting for you before seeing the actual movement. Now let's fast forward and let's have a look at the readings. So here we go, the readings are down here. We get the delta of 10.21 seconds, which is the difference between the slowest and the fastest position. 10.21 is pretty good. Seiko specification is minus 15 and plus 25 seconds a day. That's delta of 40 seconds a day. The amplitude is good. We get 275 dial up and 278 dial down. Now let's compare it to what we started with. Note I changed the order of the dial down and dial up positions. You can change the order as you please, the length of the timing, stabilizing, etc. So if you look at this, the rate values for each position, the amplitude values and the delta and compare it to what we have now, it's much better now. Pretty nifty, this software. You can get a nice readout after the timing. It lets you listen to the actual sound. You can run a long-term log, etc. I'll put a couple of links in the description if you want to check it out. One link is for the UK and the other link is for the USA and everywhere else. Back to the watch. That's the 9504 grease for the second reduction wheel, and that's the part of the automatic mechanism what's in action as you move in your wrist, winding the mainspring so you don't have to wind it manually. Personally, I find manual watches, the non-automatic, quite charming. I like them both, but there is a charm to manual watches. That's the automatic train bridge to keep everything secure. You can see all this on your 6R15s, 4R35s and 4R36s if you have a see-through case back. You can see the second reduction wheel, the first reduction wheel, the pawl lever, the ratchet wheel, the barrel, the click. It's all on show. Let's have a little test. It's looking good. Now what we need to do is to put some grease on the second reduction wheel. That's the Mobius 9504. It makes contact with the pawl lever here, and as you know, that's friction and that requires lubrication. I can't focus with the camera all across the screen, so I focus down here for you so you can see the grease and how the pawl lever rotates the wheel. Worth mentioning, this wheel only rotates anti-clockwise, regardless of which way the rotor turns. Let's have a look at it, how it all works together, shall we? The rotor will go here. It has a wheel on the underside that meshes with the first reduction wheel. As you move your wrist, the rotor will turn the first reduction wheel clockwise or anti-clockwise. That will move the pawl lever, which will turn the second reduction wheel, always anti-clockwise. That will move the ratchet wheel, always clockwise, and that winds the mainspring inside the barrel. The click here stops it from unwinding. Make sense? Awesome.
I was enjoying that groove.
So was I. And get out of my video. You have to excuse this. It's the voice in my head trying to get into my video. He's been doing that all day. So, with a bit of peace now, this section now on the motion side is all about the quick set date. This is one of the most wicked wheels you'll get to see. It's got two stories. There's the ground. There's the first floor, and Seiko gave it the most unimaginative name you can't even imagine. Intermediate wheel for date setting E. 10 stars for the design, -1 for the name. Should have been called the wicked wheel, or the double wheel if you want to be a bit more conservative. It's the star of the movement, except the pawl lever of course. That's a real mover.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. Kind of butterfly.
That's the intermediate wheel for date setting C, followed by the intermediate wheel for date setting B. Well done, Seiko. It's not just the watchmakers who get to see this in this modern day. And this is the, you guessed correctly, the guard for date corrector setting transmission wheel. Seiko, oh dear. Now let me explain. When you're in the second position, setting the date, which is anti-clockwise, or if you have the 4R36 or NH36, which is exactly the same as this, but you set the date clockwise as you turn the crown. This wheel, the date corrector setting transmission wheel A, I'm saying nothing, turns this wheel, that turns the wheel under the guard here, that turns the wheel here, that's not removable, and that turns the wicked wheel here. I'll show you later what the wicked wheel connects to. Okay, time to install the motion work. I'd like you to pay attention to this wheel here that's on the underside of the date dial maintaining plate, because we won't get to see it that well when we install this plate. It connects to the intermediate wheel for date setting E. Now which one is that? It all gets quite confusing. It's the wicked wheel. It meshes with the top part of the wheel, and in turn this wheel meshes with the date setting wheel here. That's the wheel that makes contact with the date dial when you are setting the date. I mean quick set date, not when the date changes at midnight. I'll show you that all in action when we have all the parts installed. This is just to show you the area I will be concentrating on. I'm sure you can recognize it here. I'll put a bit of 9010 here for the date setting wheel, and here for the date dial. 9501 for the Canon pinion and the minute wheel. That's the date indicator driving wheel. That's the minute wheel. Note the 9501 here for the hour wheel. That's the hour wheel. It's looking good. and this is the intermediate date driving wheel and pinion. Now let me explain. The tip here, that's the fourth wheel, that's where the seconds hand goes. It rotates 360 degrees every minute. This short section here, that's the cannon pinion. That's where the minute hand will go. It does one full rotation 360 degrees every hour. And this is the hour wheel. That's where the hour hand will go. It does one full rotation 360 degrees every 12 hours. The minute wheel here, that's an intermediate wheel between the cannon pinion, which you can see the tip of here, and the hour wheel here. The cannon pinion rotates the minute wheel, and through the correct gear ratio, the minute wheel will turn the hour wheel, which will do the one full 360 rotation every 12 hours. The date indicator driving wheel here is the wheel that will change the date at midnight. So the date wheel will do one full 360 rotation how often? Yes, once every 24 hours. And this wheel here is just an intermediate wheel between the hour wheel and the date indicator. The hour wheel meshes with the wheel, and just like the minute wheel, through the correct gear ratio it will ensure that the date indicator will turn once every 24 hours. Now I think you can understand that it is the cannon pinion that drives all the wheels here. This is where it all starts, on the motion side. Everything really starts with the barrel with the mainspring in, that's where the power is. The barrel meshes with the center wheel, you can see that here, but of course this is me testing it, it doesn't rotate this quick. The center wheel protrudes through the main plate, and the cannon pinion is friction fitted on the center wheel. That means it will move with the center wheel, but when you set in the time, it will slip on the center wheel so you can set the time. So the cannon pinion is the connection between the motion side and the train side. Got it? Cool. So let's give it a little test. All good here. This is called the date jumper. It secures some wheels and it has a spring here, the date jumper. I'll put some Mobius 9010 on it. If you skip the start, this is where I found the oil during disassembly. I bought it brand new several years ago. It's definitely Seiko, no doubt. This is the first service. Now let's put the date dial in place and let's tuck the date jumper where it needs to go. Now the date dial maintain in plate, it will secure everything and keep it in place. The 6R15 is incredibly similar to the NH36. As I mentioned before, we still have the post for the date corrector here, we just don't have the date corrector there anymore. The only thing I can think of at this moment on this side of the movement is the different color barrel arbor. I'm aware the 6R15 has the Spron mainspring, and as far as I know, the 4R and NH movements don't have that. Now let's tidy up the dial, look up Bergeon 7007 dot or dash 27 if you're wondering what I'm using. Let's have a look at the quick set date, shall we? Remember the plate that was upside down on the bench mat, and I said pay attention to this wheel because it's going to be turned the other way and we won't see it that well? You skipped that part. How dare you? Steady Leo, be nice to your viewers. I am nice to my viewers. And what are you doing here again? I'm always here. I am you. Jesus. Right, so it's this one. It connects to the intermediate wheel for date setting E. That doesn't tell us much, does it? If I tell you it's the wicked wheel, we all know what it is. Now in the date setting position, the second position when you pull the crown out, if you turn the crown clockwise, the date corrector will turn a wheel here for setting the day, which we don't have. And when I turn the crown anti-clockwise, it will slide over to this side and advance the date. It pushes on the teeth on the date dial. See how it works? I hope you now understand what happens under the bonnet when you set in the date. It's not difficult. The date corrector rotating and pushing on the teeth of the date dial. And how does the date change when you wear in the watch? Nothing to do with the corrector we've just looked at. As the time advances, the date indicator driving wheel slowly advances and pushes the tooth on the date dial, forcing the date dial to move forward. Eventually, when it goes far enough, it comes off the tooth on the dial and the date wheel advances to a new position and the date is changed. Now let's zoom out a little. I'm in the second, the quick set date position. Now when I turn anti-clockwise, the corrector moves to the right towards the date dial and changes the date. Nice and easy. Now when you pull the crown out to the third position, the time setting position, and I rotate the crown to move the time forward, the date indicator driving wheel advances and forces the date dial to move forward. Now you can see why it takes almost 2 hours for the date change to complete. The jumper spring, that is what keeps the date dial in position. It stops it from freely rotating and keeps it in place. It's roughly at around 7 o'clock here. Let's put the dial on very, very carefully. Don't mess it up, Leo. I won't. Stop nagging. Let me get the dial feet in the holes in the main plate. Let's do one more quick check on the dial, how it aligns in the date window. Yep, that's perfect. See the hour hand and the minute hand here? I like to measure the diameter of the holes so I can select the appropriate stakes for the job. Measure twice, cut once. The hour hand first, that's the one that goes where? If you set the hour wheel, you were correct. Now let me switch to the other stake. That's the minute hand and that goes where? Yes, it goes on the cannon pinion. That's the friction fitted part on the center wheel. And finally, the seconds hand. And yes, that's the fourth wheel and it goes on the tip that was coated with epilame. Now we need to case it up. A little bit of the silicone S7 grease here on the gasket. That's of course the crown that rotates the compass bezel. Let's put this wheel here. And I think I'll have to put the clip there off the camera. Here we go. Nice and fresh grease and rotating nicely. Let's put the case over it. I'm speeding it up. It's not running fast. You really don't want to watch me doing all this work at the speed I normally do it. We'd be here forever. That's again the silicone S7 grease on the gasket here. Let's put the stem in. The setting lever will keep it in place. Now we can insert this ring here and secure it in place with the case clamps. There are 2 of them. I'll show you just the one. It keeps the movement secured in the case. The last part we need to put in is the rotor. That's what keeps oscillating while you're wearing the watch and winds the mainspring. And that's a bit of 90-20 on the bearing here, just to keep it running smoothly. And to put it in, you can't just screw it down any way you want. You can do that to start with, but then you have to align the middle of the rotor with the crown, and there is a hole in the first reduction wheel, and that needs to be aligned with a post in the main plate. I'll show you. You need to imagine a line from the center here to the crown, and the rotor needs to be in the middle of that line. And the other line goes from the center here again to this post, that's for the balance wheel, and the hole in the first reduction wheel needs to be in that line here, not 180 degrees on the opposite side under the rotor. Now when you rotate the rotor 360 degrees, everything aligns again. Now let's put some of the silicone 7 grease on the gasket. I kept saying S7 before, wasn't I? I don't know where I got that from. I think it's the Seiko S4 and S6 greases I have around here. That confused me. Ah, now I know. I got a label on the oil pot and I didn't want to call it just 7, so I called it S7, the S being for silicone. Anyway, it's Horotec Silicone 7 grease. You need some kind of decent grease to keep the water away. It doesn't have to be this one. Let's use the case opener to give it a nice tight seal. Sounds wrong, doesn't it? Closing it with a case opener. Well, that's what it is. I guess case closer sounds just as wrong. Anyway, opens and closes cases, same thing. Now we can put the strap on it. This is the aftermarket one from Strapcoat, I think. It's quite a few years ago I bought it. There's no doubt you will find plenty of aftermarket bracelets for these Saabs. They are popular watches, they come with not the best of straps, so there are aftermarket ones out there. So there we have it after a much needed service. I hope you enjoyed it, perhaps learned something new, hopefully understand a little bit more how your watch works and what happens when your watch is being serviced. There are some links in the description, what gear I use, what books I like, horology books. Check it out, plenty of useful links. If you enjoyed it, give it thumbs up. If you really enjoyed it and you want to support my channel, there is a link to buy me a coffee in the description. You can use the YouTube super thanks, entirely up to you. And I best be getting on with another watch. Bye for now.
You're chilling in the rain. You're some kind of butterfly.